Servus Männer, it's Red Pill Germany again. I still remember the 80s as a time when the nuclear threat was real, and I also remember my father telling me about the 70s when there were several very tense moments where people in Europe and especially in Germany had the realistic prospect and fear, not hysteria or paranoia, no fear of being wiped out by nuclear fire. Because it was exactly that, wiping out Central Europe in the beginning of a nuclear confrontation, what people in Washington had planned. Now then, later through the 90s and early 2000s, and up until very recently, nobody would have thought, or not a lot of people would have thought, that times like these and this nuclear threat would come again within our lifetimes. But here we are right now. So I personally think, and I'm not the only one, that the danger of such an event occurring right now is very high. It doesn't have to be a full-blown global nuclear war where billions of people would be wiped out within hours. It could just be that the United States will use smaller warheads, where maybe they don't provoke a full-scale response, or maybe that Russia would just, try one nuke on Europe, because that also wouldn't really provoke a full-scale response from the side of the United States. However, Germany, Central Europe, or Europe, because this is the battleground right now, is in real danger, in my opinion at least. Now it is the same group once again that pushes for this kind of confrontation, this group that, is not really threatened by annihilation because they don't live here or there, they kind of live everywhere. And most importantly, the same people that cause all this suffering or might cause all this suffering will use it later as a bargaining chip or as a way to blackmail people emotionally and very real in the aftermath. So by rewriting history and by clever marketing techniques, they will make sure that they can profit for the next 100 years from all this loss of human life. But more to the point, why am I so pessimistic right now? Well, I've been saying this for a very long time, and I've been accused of being a Putin friend or something like that, or even a tanky, I was called. I had to look that up. That is like some kind of militant communist or something. No, that's nonsense. I'm just pro-German, and I like Germans to survive, that's all. But I've been saying that for a long time, even in the beginning when it was about giving Ukraine some helmets or some protective vests and then some normal weapons, and then later it was anti-aircraft, and then it was battle tanks and artillery, and now they want 100 modern fighter planes. So as I was saying in the very beginning, this will only go on, and their demands will grow ever higher, and in the end they will want to have nukes stationed there, of course, or nuclear capability with these fighter planes that they will be getting now from NATO, or, well, let's rather say from the US. On top of that, there are attacks that are being carried out on Russian territory now, and it's not so clear to me, at least, if these are basically Russian resistance fighters or operatives behind enemy lines, or if it is really attacks that is carried out from NATO territory on Russia already right now. I don't know. It is unclear to me. Be that as it may, I think it is easy to see for everyone that this conflict is escalating to new levels as time goes by, and red line after red line is being crossed. I also believe that it is a fact that the West doesn't act here on principle or because of humanitarian reasons and international law. I think this is all nonsense. I will tell you in a bit what I personally think is behind it, but I think it is pretty safe to say that it is not for these humanitarian or principled reasons. That is all absolute nonsense. The reason for that is, as an example, in my opinion, that there is starvation happening right now in Bergkarabakh. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but there are Christian exclaves in this territory between Armenia and Azerbaijan, for example, right now. Remember that there was a conflict between these two countries very recently, and the EU was awfully quiet about that. And now Azerbaijani groups have surrounded the area and they don't let any food in, so they're basically trying to starve the population there. That is, of course, an atrocity that goes way beyond what Putin is doing in Ukraine right now. And let me give you another example. We know that the Korean people are a divided people, just like my own people, the Germans, were and in some parts still are to this day. But if you would be in the role of a lobbyist who is trying to, sound the war drums in order to get a coalition together to attack North Korea in order to unite the Korean people again, because think about all these human rights violations in North Korea. It's basically a prison. People are starving. Yeah, this is all true. I wouldn't want to live in North Korea. I believe it is very horrible what this dictator is doing there. However, nobody that I know, nobody who is sane of mind, would suggest that an international coalition would attack the country in order to get rid of the dictatorship and unite the Korean people again. Because as things stand right now, this could also cause a global nuclear conflict with, once again, billions of dead people. And when you weigh these things against one another, we kind of made our peace with the fact that North Korea is a locked up country under a ruthless, brutal dictatorship. Just like East Germany used to be. And nobody attacked East Germany in order to liberate these poor Germans that lived under a communist regime there. Now, however, in the case of Ukraine, things seem to be completely different. All of a sudden, the fact that teeny tiny portions of the land are under a different administration right now should be enough to provoke a third world war, potentially with nuclear annihilation of hundreds of millions or billions of people. And it's not even like in the case of Iraq, for example, where the British and the US basically invaded the country and they were not even from that region. No, the people who live in these now Russian-controlled parts, they are, for the most part, ethnic Russians themselves, who live there for a very long time, who speak Russian, and in a way you can argue that the US-friendly satellite government that came into power after a coup in Kiev, that they conducted military action against these people there. So in a way, Russia is protecting them even. Now, I don't know what the people who live there really think about that. They're probably fed up with both sides, and they suffered horribly at the hands of both factions. No doubt about that, in my opinion. But at the same time, I also think, if there were peace now, if this armed conflict would end, that the living situations there would be worse or at the same level as North Korea. I highly, highly doubt that. So the question you need to ask yourself is that really worth escalating the situation to a point where one party or the other will use nukes? And yes, maybe I have a different perspective on this affair as someone who lives in Canada or in the United States or in Australia, because I'm living in Central Europe. And once again, it would be our territory, our countries that would be blown up by someone in Washington who tries to get his way. In my belief, at least, there is not one reason for why they do that. There is always a bunch of reasons, and they want to achieve multiple goals. In Iraq, for example, or Syria, it is about energy maybe. It maybe is also about controlling the general area with a military presence there. But what strikes me really in this Eastern European conflict is that it is purely European people who suffer the consequences from this war. It almost seems to me as if somebody tried here to reduce the number of European people and to cause harm to Europeans, and then later will maybe be rewarded with very cheap real estate once the area is mostly depopulated. So if you look at leading figures in the US State Department and also who is in influential positions in Ukraine right now, well, you can't help but see a certain pattern there. Maybe someone wants to create a new settling ground for their people here. Anyway, so obviously back in the 70s, back in the 80s, there was a massive peace movement in Europe at least, and I think also in the US, and they had big influence on politics. They wanted also that the West unilaterally gets rid of all their nukes, even though the Soviet Union still had theirs, of course, and most of these people were, of course, just like the current Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz. They were supporters of the Soviet Union here in the West. They were in the socialist youth, and they were really big supporters of communism, and of course they still are. But what is so interesting that nowadays, when it is not the evil Soviet Union anymore, but a more rational adversary that is not on a mission to conquer the entire planet and liberate the proletariat worldwide. You can say a lot of things about Putin, but I never heard that anyone accuses him of trying to conquer the whole world and to begin a global revolution for the proletariat, because that is literally what the Soviet Union was planning to do. Now, it is so interesting to me that most of the people who were in the peace movement back then, of course they're old now, but most of them are supporting Ukraine now. And all of a sudden, they don't care about nuclear war anymore. They are actually in favor of more nukes, and we should show these Russians. To me, that just shows that a lot of these people who were in the peace movement back then, they were never about peace or about security in the first place, but maybe they were just commie influencers. Well, of course, I hope I am wrong about this. I mean, a lot of people thought that nuclear war is inevitable back then, but they were wrong. We had a more or less peaceful revolution in Germany, and also the Soviet Union dissolved more or less peacefully. I mean, it wasn't a nuclear disaster. So these pessimists back then were wrong, but I really hope that I am wrong today also. But as you know me, I can't help to be a little bit more on the black pill side when it comes to these things. Let me know what you think about that in the comments down below. Servus, Kameraden.